Well, I think that Juanita just always underestimates how much we all love her too, and what a wonderful and it was a nice birthday. I really didn't want to do anything really dramatic this time. You know, sometimes you want to have a big hoopla, and this time I really kind of wanted it to be low key, which is what it was. It was really lovely. But you know, when you get past 70, when you go to renew your driver's license, you have to take a written test. Did you know that? And I thought, you know, I'm married to a retired cop. I know traffic laws. Why do I need to study? All my friends started saying, you got to study. What for? So one of my friends said, go online and go to the practice exams and just try them out and see, you know, how you do. So the first practice exam I took, I flunked. Oh no, I can't not have a driver's license. So I took all the practice exams and thankfully I passed. What I did not tell the last group, but that was really kind of where spirit interfered in this wonderful way. My vision is just borderline 20/30, you know. And well, last time I went to take my eye test at the DMV, they said, you barely passed it. And I thought, oh no. Well, since then I've had cataract surgery and glasses and all that, so I knew it was better. But the gal, when she was filling out the form, said, oh, do you wear glasses when you're driving? I said, oh yeah, all the time. And I wear sunglasses too, and I really do. I wear prescription glasses when I'm driving. And I guess she checked off that I took my eye test. So I didn't have to take it. I got out of there so fast. I was so grateful. So look out, I'm driving for another 5 years. You know, it could be, who knows. Okay, now there's another thing going on here now. Wait a minute, just a second. Dawn and I, neither of us were born with any technical ability whatsoever. And last week we had a problem with our router, so they sent us a new router, and so we set up the new router. And then this morning when I went to print my talk, it didn't work, the printer, and then the router was out. So I brought my iPad. So it's on my iPad. I've never done this before, but I have all my notes here, and it worked okay. Yeah. So I saw this minister on TV one time using his iPad, and I thought, cool, you know. So today I'll be like he was. But Reverend Josh and Gavin and April are enjoying themselves in Sedona and at the Grand Canyon. And I guess yesterday they took the train from Williams to the Grand Canyon, and they've just been having a great time. And it's wonderful to give them a chance to get away and have a wonderful vacation and a break from everything here, because they'll come back so renewed and refreshed. So I'm grateful to get to be here this morning, but I'm also grateful that they are enjoying their vacation time. So let's send lots of love to them too, that they're having a safe and happy time. And as you know, Reverend Josh this month has been talking about Sufi wisdom. And I love the Sufi teachings. I feel that they are such a wonderful blend with what we teach, that there are so many parallels between Sufism and New Thought and religious science, as there are parallels between all the mystical teachings, because we are a mystical teaching, that's what we are, as a Sufism. And I personally resonate with the Sufis a great deal because I had the opportunity to travel with a group of Sufis in Turkey and experience their day-to-day life and experience their attitude and their joy and all of the things that they practice and teach. And as many of you know, the Sufis are the mystical branch of Islam, and they really are a beautiful, beautiful religion and teaching. We come from a mystical tradition because mysticism is about beyond the physical. We also call it metaphysical. But these traditions are very ancient. They probably really began way back with Zoroastrianism. And Sufism, they believe, probably started shortly after the death of Muhammad, somewhere after his death, which was believed to be 635. Around 675 is when they first kind of thought that began, this more mystical teaching. But Ernest Holmes, without a doubt, was also a mystic. Emma Curtis Hopkins, if you read her, it's pretty obvious that she's a mystic. Try portraying her sometime and see what that's like. And there are many, many others that comprise the roots of New Thought and ancient wisdom, which is what we teach. Sufi actually means wisdom, sort of like Sophia in Christianity means wisdom. Very similar words. And so, and as I said, there are many different views on when it began, but that's not really as important as what Sufism continues to teach to this day. Rumi, who was a 13th century mystic, Sufi mystic, and also the son of a mystic teacher, resided in Konya, Turkey. And in Konya is a school there for whirling dervishes. It's a dervish school, and the Sufi tradition is out of which the whirling dervishes had come. When you see a picture of dancers with tall hats on, like turbans on their heads, spinning, that's Sufism, that's Sufi dancing. And the Sufis believe when they do that kind of dancing, that it takes them into an ecstatic state. If you see Sufi dancers, they will usually, every time I've ever seen them, and I've seen them a few times, they walk out in a circle, they start to walk around in a circle wearing black capes or long cloaks that are black. And they go around the circle once, and then they remove the cloak. And the cloak represents their shroud, represents the fact that we are, it's like the Buddhist impermanence that, we're only here for a while. The hats they wear, these tall conical hats, represent their tombstone and also represent the death of the ego. And then when they spin, as they turn in their white gowns, which represents kind of the spiritual experience of life, their skirts kind of spin out and they do this turning and spinning. And one hand is up, receiving, and the other hand is down, pouring out God's love, receiving God's love here and pouring it out on the earth as they spin. It's a really beautiful dance and movement, and during that dance, they spin for a long time. They don't do like a ballet dancer does where they spot at one place and keep turning their head. Their heads are turning too. I don't know how it is that they are able not to completely collapse on the floor out of dizziness, but I'm sure it's part of that altered state that they get into mentally. And Rumi would spin like that, and then write these beautiful poems and free verses and writings. And so his writings are there at the museum in Konya, all of them done in Arabic calligraphy and beautifully illustrated with all of the wonderful art that the Middle Easterners do. And so you can see them, I can't read them yet, but they were just beautiful to see. Also in Turkey and many Middle Eastern countries, also true in Israel and Palestine, the graves of these great ancestors of religion and spirituality are frequently not underground, but in a casket up above. And his is like that in the museum, draped in green silk, and his turban is on top. And sort of like, my crazy imagination gets up in the middle of the night and puts on his turban and spins. But he's one of my top favorites when it comes to reading inspirational material. I love his poetry. It speaks to me and it amazes me. And those of you who know me well know that I do a lot of work in interfaith. And this particular poem is one that really I resonate with because I feel very much the same way. Not Christian or Jew or Muslim, not Hindu, Buddhist, Sufi, or Zen, not any religion or cultural system. I am not from the East or the West, not out of the ocean or up from the ground, not natural or ethereal, not composed of elements at all. I do not exist, am not an entity in this world or the next, did not descend from Adam or Eve or any origin story. My place is placeless, a trace of the traceless, neither body or soul. I belong to the beloved, have seen the two worlds as one, and that one call to and know. First, last, outer, inner, only that, breath breathing, human being. Isn't that beautiful? I think of that, I think of Gandhi when he said neither Hindu nor Jew, neither Christian nor Jew, nor Hindu nor Muslim, I am none of these and all of them. So it's like all of those mystical teachers kind of say similar things. Holmes saw the thread of all of the great traditions, saw the thread of truth in all of them. And rather than saying that one was right and the other was wrong, he found the threads that came through them all and began to work on those principles rather than on isolating one particular religion, although he always felt that we were a Christian tradition, that we were Christian and more because he saw the threads of truth. So Rumi says we're not what we think we are, we're only breath and the beloved of the beloved. The other thing about so many traditions, ancient traditions, indigenous traditions, the breath is so important in all of those traditions. If you do meditation, what do? We focus on the breath. If you do yoga, you focus on the breath. It's always about the breath. When we read the ancient Upanishads and about the origins of life itself, God breathed upon it. So there's all this about breath. So it's breath. We are the breath and the beloved of the beloved. Rumi goes on to describe us in this way. He says, a craftsman pulled a reed from a reed bed, cut holes in it, and called it a human being. Since then, it has been wailing a tender agony of parting, never mentioning the skill that gave it life as a flute. It is as though we forget that we are the beloved of the beloved. We forget that the beloved breathed the breath into us, and that our song, that flute song, really is intended to be a song of oneness with that which created us out of itself, but we forget, and so we wail about our sense of separation. True? We forget, and we forget. So he goes on to talk about that he's really talking about our false belief that we're somehow separate from God, which is counter to his own Sufi belief that we are part of a greater whole. Sufism, like all the other mystical traditions, teaches of oneness, that we are one with all of life, that we are one with everything that is, that we always have been and we always will be. So if we're not part of that one, when we forget, then what are we? We are truly only that which breathes itself out of itself. Rumi breaks down all the barriers of labels, of appearances, and invites us to see what cannot be seen by the naked eye. He invites us to see our oneness with all it is. And that is the way of the Sufi, and the way of the mystic, and the way of the wise ones. They understand that we are all something far beyond the self. In New Thought, we talk about matter, right? We talk about matter, and we say that, there's that line about mind over matter, but it's about matter that we believe that we're solid material, right? We believe that this is all solid and real. But that matter is really not what matters. It's consciousness that matters. That we live in a field that I like to call pure energy. For me, that's the way I can grasp the idea of God, because energy is everywhere. Energy is absolutely everywhere. I can't see it all the time, but I know it's there. I can feel it. I can feel it in my own body. I can feel it when it's resonating in some aspect of life around me, but I can't see it. And I believe that we're also part of this unified field that I mentioned when I was talking about our memorial candles this morning. And I like to think of that unified field as pure love. I believe that's what we came from, I believe that's what we're in now, and I believe that's what we continue on as we move through this dimension, this physical form in this earthly body, this spacesuit, as we are inhabiting this particular plane, this particular planet. But I believe that we are all part of that unified field. That spirit or God or goddess or Allah or one power or whatever name we give it. We used to have a lady that came here to church that called God Bob. Well, Bob, whatever name. It's pure love, and it vibrates everywhere all the time. It's continually vibrating, and it's continually expressing everywhere, and it's continually saying yes to everything. And sometimes we, in our limited thinking, want it only to say yes to the things that we want, right? I just wanted to say yes to a perfect relationship and a perfect life and a perfect thing. But Spirit is saying yes to everything. It is saying yes to birth. It is saying yes to joy. It is saying yes to beauty. It's saying yes to creativity. It's saying yes to death. It's saying yes to destruction. It's saying yes to light, and it's saying yes to darkness. It is saying yes to everything. And that's very much the way the Sufis believe. That's very much the way the Muslims believe. I know Josh mentioned a few weeks ago about the 99 names of God. They're not all pretty. Some of those names are things like destroyer. Some of those names are things that we would not think of when we talk about our God qualities in prayer. And yet, if it's everything and allness, then it's everything. Right? I mean, when the trees fall on the ground, they rot and decay. But what happens then? It nourishes the earth and we get new life. That's why we see it all as everything. And the Sufis see that. And they're very, very practical about that. So that's the field we live in. Everything else, that field out there, everything else is made up by our perceptions of what is. So since we all see through our own filters, through where we were born and who our parents are and how we grew up and what we were taught and where we lived and where we went to school or church or whatever, all of our filters, our experiences, our opinions, our cultures, our languages, our religions, we're all seeing something uniquely different from the other. Are we not? So every one of us has our own perception. Every one of us has our own perspective, which really makes you ask the question then, what is truth? Really? What is truth? Because truth for me may not be truth for you, right? And so even sometimes telling the truth may not be the same truth, right? So it's all about how our experience calls to us. And yet, beyond that physical, earthly experience, there's something deeper, and that's the beloved. And the beloved is constantly calling to us to remind us of the flute that we are, to be singing the song of joy and love and oneness, that the flute calls to us, reminding us in subtle ways that we're more than our bodies and our experiences, because we are one in the mind and heart of God. And so we forget again, and we wail like the reed flute, forgetting that which created us. As I said, Rumi found spiritual ecstasy in whirling round and round out of his dervish experiences. And out of that, he felt the power of spirit, that love and that divine embrace. And he fell in love with that over and over again. And that also is part of the Sufi tradition, is falling in love with God. Who wouldn't want to fall in love with God? And that's part of what they teach. And he also had a very special friendship. He had a beloved friend named Shams who showed up in his life one day. And Shams became his mystical teacher and his mystical, in a way, soulmate, not in a romantic sense. And yet they loved each other very, very, very much. And they would spend days and days of time together talking about the divine, talking about this divine mystery, this consciousness, the beloved, this energy of life. They would talk so long that they forget to eat and drink, but they would move into this higher state of consciousness, this higher ground, if you will, where they communicated at a very high level. And so much of the early poetry that Rumi wrote was written to Shams, or about Shams, or because of Shams. And so one of the things that he wrote during that time was a very short writing that I have loved for a long time and try to live by it as much as I can. Out beyond wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I will meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about ideas, language, even the phrase, each other, doesn't make any sense. That there's this field that we can go to, that we can move to in consciousness, that is really beyond words. We can access it in a lot of different ways. And I'm sure you've all been in that field at some time or another. For instance, one time that you might have been in that field is when you felt that infatuation for that first love, or that falling in love sense with another, where you feel like you're just so connected and so united with one another. You're in the field when you feel that rush of infatuation and attraction. We go there when we're feeling deeply connected in nature. We go there when we feel deeply connected to another in our way of just being together. It's the same field where we can go when we feel a need to resolve differences with another. It cannot be manipulated. That field is not something we can just turn on and turn off. It can't be manipulated. It must be felt at the heart level. It's a connection that we glimpse in meditation or prayer, and it's the connection we feel when we're having a heartfelt conversation with a loved one. And you know those moments when you feel like, oh, he really gets me. She really gets me. I feel that right now. I feel it. So going to that field can be intentional, setting the intention to be in that field. And we arrive there when we are willing to put aside judgment and blame, when we're willing to let go of our closely held opinions or our needs for an outcome. We can go there when we say that love matters more than being right. It's the place of deep listening. It's not the place of thinking about what to say next, but listening with the desire to so fully understand the other as to set aside our own ego or our own need to be heard in order to be able to hear them. Another great mystic, St. Francis of Assisi, said it this way: seek not so much to be understood as to understand. That to me is being in the field. If we're in our head, demanding that we are right and wanting only to get our point across, we're not in the field. In the field, our heart says, what you have to say matters to me. If we're not in the field, our head is saying, what I have to say matters to me. Right? You know the difference. What you have to say matters to me. I set aside all of my preconceived ideas. I set aside my ego. I set aside my need to be right. I sit only in that space of truly listening, truly opening to that connection that we have with one another. Bill made a recommendation a week or so ago to go see a movie called Inside Out. How many of you have seen it? It's a cute little movie. It's a cartoon, what do I want to say, Pixar animated film. But it's about getting inside the mind of a little girl, getting inside the experience of a little child growing up, and it's all cartoon, and looking at all of her feelings. Of course, it's really about the whole brain activity, but the most important part are the feelings. And there's joy, and there's sadness, and there's fear, and there's anger, and they all want her to feel her feelings. But joy kind of takes over and wants her just to have joy, just to have everything joyful, and she's constantly pushing away sadness because she feels like sadness is going to mess up the joy, and so poor little sadness gets stuck over in the corner. But as the movie evolves, one of the characters has a moment of just abject sadness and sorrow. And so little sadness, this little character, comes over and sits by him and just listens as he pours out his heart to her. And as he pours out his heart to her, she just stays in the field with him. She just stays right there with him, right where he is. And all of a sudden he turns to her and he says, I feel better now. And so joy begins to realize how important sorrow is, that we really need both. and that we need to hear each other so that we can experience those feelings and have someone to reflect them with. That's the field. She was in the field. If you haven't seen it, it's a cute movie. You might want to wait till you can get it on Netflix, but it's a really cute movie. So out beyond wrongdoing and right doing is also that place where we recognize that no one is against us. No one is against us. And what needs really to happen is a new point of view. Not the one that we've held on to, but the one that emerges from deep dialogue. The point of view that comes from the surrender of the ego so that our authentic self can emerge. Here is Ukov, the authentic self. So in the field is where we find connection. In the field is where we find oneness and forgiveness and healing. To repeat what he said, when the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas and language, even the phrase each other, doesn't make any sense. When you go deep into meditation, there are no words. There are no words. It's wordless. There are no words. You could not use words in order to describe what goes on when we're in deep meditation. It's a silent connection. And it's like that in the field, too. It's a silent connection. It's where we have awakenings. Perhaps the field is where Eunice Shriver went when she had the realization that children who had intellectual difficulties could still perform athletically, could still play, and could still compete. And look what happened. She went into that field and somehow connected other people into that field who began to see it too. And look what's going on today in LA.
Yeah.
Thousands of kids in Special Olympics that wouldn't be there if someone hadn't gone to the field to see what could happen. And now they're going to the field. Wait. If you think about that, it's the field where people who are willing to do it can set aside the differences of race, religion, political ideology, culture, and realize that our oneness is where we need to be. To realize that it's our oneness that will create that planet, that world that works for everyone, where all human beings can live a sustainable life. It's the field where we hear the still small voice guiding us toward forgiveness, toward harmony, toward peace. It's beyond wrongdoing and right doing, which takes judgment. It's in a place where we begin to see things with new eyes. And it's perhaps the field where we go when we sit in stillness and we feel our connection with the divine. There are no words there, but there's a feeling of fullness that overflows within us in the awareness of the one. And it's in that field of pure divine love that we can see ourselves in a new way, where we find transformation and a depth of understanding that's beyond words. So when the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. So the next time you hear yourself wailing like the reed flute, quiet your mind and go to the field. I will meet you there.